And we are actually going live on all of our different platforms. So I know a lot of people keep asking. This video will be available everywhere.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Hello there. Uh, as always, Lehman India is very excited to partner with Sipping Thoughts to bring you a session today on reflections, lessons, and insights from a 30-year career, this time with Sameer Chadha, CEO, Kpmg Global Services. This is one of the many sessions in our leadership series, a program that brings thought leaders from different walks of life to talk about their words of wisdom on varied topics. I'm Urvi Juneja, chapter leader at Lehman India. And just briefly about our partners, Sipping Thoughts. Sipping Thoughts, it's a multi-platform media company co-founded by Sukirti Gupta and Meeta Gudgutia. It was set up keeping in mind the tagline, Real Women, Real Thoughts, a no judgment platform where they want to create a network of women for women. And now about Lehman India. Lehman India is the official national chapter for Lehman in India. It's a community founded by Facebook COO Sheryl Sandberg that empowers women towards their ambitions. Lehman India aims to contribute towards encouraging more women in leadership positions through their peer circles, campaigns, collaborations, and events such as these. Our aim is to increase representation of women in leadership positions by enabling more women in the workforce. During this session today, Sameer will talk about his experience and the most significant lessons learned during his career. Reflecting on his 30 years of working, Sameer shares his insights about what matters most during the course of one's career, what is important and what is not, and what each one of us can do to make our journey more meaningful. And of course, deal with challenges such as COVID, which are really unprecedented times. A seasoned business leader, Sameer is the Chief Executive Officer of Kpmg Global Services. During the course of a career spanning 30 years, he's held a number of strategic leadership roles with both third-party service providers and offshoring captives of major multinational organizations such as Lehman Brothers and Barclays. At KGS, Sameer is responsible for the overall management of and accountability of the platform. His vision for the platform is to be a strategic asset for member firms globally, delivering superior value and helping them and their clients to succeed. So welcome, Sameer. Glad to have you on board today.
Thank you, Urvi, and thank you, Sukirti.
So before we really jump into the session and hear from you, I just want to sort of resonate what's going on in people's mind. We understand that given the unprecedented situation across the country today, with second wave being disastrous, we're all sailing in difficult times. People have concerns about their livelihood, their loved ones, and these thoughts really preoccupy their mind. So being a leader, how do you keep your workforce motivated and keep them going in such challenging times when people have a lot of fatigue built up?
Okay, so again, thank you to Sukirti and to you for having me on this, and thank you for everybody who's taken out time on a Saturday evening to dial in for this. And I think yes, I guess the second wave of COVID that we are seeing is, I'm sure it has everybody scared, for the lack of a better word, right? I think the sheer spread of what it is, right, with new highs coming, every single day, it's really worrisome. I'm sure all of us have friends and family who've contracted it. I'm sure some of us have contracted it. I actually got it in November, and I have recovered since then. But I do think that we've been in KPMG, we've been shut now, i.e. we've not been working from office. We've been working from home since March 2020, which means it's about 13 months now that we've been working actually from home. And we expect to work from home till at least the 30th of May. And we'll soon take a decision on, do we extend that or what do we really do, right? And I think we followed a couple of tenets during this. I think every decision that we've taken during this period has been with two objectives in mind. One is the health of our colleagues and well-being of our colleagues right up there, and then followed by the health of our business, right? And I say it in that order because that's the order that we think about our decisions in. Should we open office? Should we not open office? Do we need to give any insurance covers, extra insurance covers to our colleagues? How do we actually help sometimes colleague arrange, beds in hospitals through, our facilities team? How do we actually ensure that we, office and work has frankly now become the same, office and home has become the same thing, right? And there's a lot of talk about how there seems to be no boundaries now in terms of people calling you at all hours, and the work hours are just stretching. And we are trying to be exceptionally mindful of making sure that work and life balance can actually be maintained, right? We over communicate with colleagues. We have been for some time now, so that they know what's on the mind of the leadership, that what are we thinking about reopening office? Will things be different when we reopen office? A number of our colleagues have gone back to their hometowns to be with their parents, right? We're trying to think through giving them ample notice for them to come back to the cities where we operate out of. And I will say a couple of things, which is that one is that there's this fantastic quote from Helen Keller, which I think is very appropriate for our current times, which says that the world is full of suffering, but it's also full of the overcoming of it. And I guess we have to try and be hopeful that that this will go behind us, that vaccines are happening, that hopefully COVID appropriate behaviors will be demonstrated by everybody. Everybody will take responsibility for this. And I had a catch up with some of our KGS colleagues last week. And one thing I did ask people to reflect upon, the fact of the matter is that a lot of our colleagues have had a difficult time during the pandemic. Emotional well-being is a big topic of discussion, not just in KPMG, but everywhere. I'm sure people on this session have, faced their own challenges. But sometimes I think it's helpful to, at least I told our employees that I think it's helpful to sometimes see things from a relative perspective, right? I do think that a lot of us have a lot to be grateful for, right? We've got jobs, we can afford to work from home. We can afford to be in the confines and the safety of our own homes, right? When you read about, the real stories of sorrow that are happening across the country, right? Not just the migrant laborers, but when you think about industries like hospitality, like travel, etc., which get deeply impacted. Before this entire surge happened and these numbers became where they were, I'd gone for dinner to a restaurant which is just opened in Gurgaon. I'm based in Gurgaon. I'd gone to this restaurant which is just opened, a lot of fanfare. Went in, it was a 200 cover restaurant, and there were 20 people inside that restaurant, right? And I was thinking to myself, I said, how does this person who opened it, the kind of hopes and the dreams and desires that they had, the wait staff, the chefs, the bartenders, I mean, what kind of future, sits ahead of them if this does not get controlled? And therefore, the only thing I would say is that sometimes, we do have often many things to be grateful about. And I just think we need to remind ourselves about that from time to
time. Sure. So really hearing from you, keeping that communication channel open, being mindful of emotional well-being of people, and seeing things from a relative perspective really stand out. And I must say that, yes, there's definitely some learning to draw from there. So what are some of these things that you suggest we do to cope up with this new normal?
Again, I think it's, to each their own, and everybody has a different way of dealing with it. From my perspective, as I said, we've been at home for 1 year, and it's just an opportunity to, frankly, I have to say that the kind of bonding that you can do with your family during these times, right? We all have often said that we don't have enough time to be with the people we really want to be, and I think just having 2 meals every day. I have 2 boys, a 24-year-old and an 18-year-old, and I think to have every meal of every day with your family is an unusual thing, right? These are the smaller things. Sometimes, I think I'm quite a voracious reader, and I see Sukirti has like a very nice looking bookshelf behind her. Mm-hmm. The point is that oftentimes in the hubbub of work, right, you end up not being able to do what you want to. So I've been able to pick up, reading again. I try to walk every day. I try to get myself, thinking of different things. And I think, like I said, I don't want this to sound cliched in any shape or form, but I really do think that I keep reminding ourselves, and I keep reminding my children at least for sure, that, that we have a lot to be grateful for, right? And therefore you have to be thankful of the fact that, like I said, that you have a home that you're in, you have a job, you therefore you're not as exposed as, let's say, a lot of other people are. And I think, the fact that a lot of us are, or for a lot of us, our commutes are completely cut down, right? What do you do with that time, right? Do you use it to, I don't know, pick up something which you always wanted to, but you couldn't actually do? For me, it's, reading. But for somebody else, it could be, I don't know, learning how to play an instrument, or, working out that much more, and so on and so forth. So I do think that in every crisis, there is the ability to see some opportunity in it. Every dark cloud, there is the opportunity to see some silver lining, and at least, we should try and hold on to what we can.
Absolutely, Samir. Can't agree more. So really, spending time with our family, getting back to our hobbies, and enjoying a little pleasures of life is what we can all be grateful about today. And with this, I wanted to hand over to you, Samir, to hear more about your journey, to more about your life lessons. And I'm sure our audience are eagerly waiting. So over to you.
Okay. So I'm just going to talk about maybe, let's just say there are 12 to 14 elements I'm going to talk about. Whenever somebody says that it's my, it's lessons from a 30-year-old journey, I have to say that really makes me feel old every time I kind of see that title. Anyway, this is a title I only came up with, but yes, the fact is I've been working 30 years. I'm a chartered accountant by education. I stay in Gurgaon with my family, wife, 2 boys, and largely I've spent my career in Delhi. And I spent 6 years in Bombay on a couple of jobs. And when I was growing up, I actually, my parents were both doctors, and they were posted in Libya. So I actually, did about 4 years in Libya with them. So I think I'm currently the CEO of an organization called Kpmg Global Services. It's a 12,000 person company which supports different member firms of Kpmg. Kpmg, if anybody in the audience may not be aware, is one of the big 4 audit, accounting, consulting organizations. Prior to this, I used to work with Barclays, where I used to do the same job for Barclays based out of Delhi. And what I'm going to say is simple stuff, and hopefully it resonates with the audience. I'm not entirely sure about the makeup of the audience, but hopefully these are lessons that at least that will resonate for a lot of people. They are geared towards people mostly, from a corporate point of view, because most of my career, in fact, all my career has been in the corporate space, and therefore, but I do hope that whatever the makeup of the audience is, that you can take some takeaways from this. So with that, if we can move forward. So I think this is one thing that, I think in this here and now generation where everything is real time and whatever you want is at the click of a button and attention spans are so small, I do think that one thing people need to be conscious of is the fact that careers take time to build, right? There is no shortcut to building a career, okay? It just does take that amount of time, much like, clearing school takes you 12 years. Some things still need to take their path. And I do think that, when people talk about overnight successes, the saying is that even overnight successes take years to build, right? And I think we just see the tip of the iceberg, which is where a person is. But at the end of the day, it takes a lot of effort to get there, okay? And I do feel there is no shortcut to success, and there's no substitute for hard work. My sons, at least my elder son who's 24 and working, is always trying to understand what is the quickest way to get ahead. And I said, unfortunately, there is no quick way for you to super accelerate your career, right? The fact is, you can get from one level to the other, maybe a year here, maybe a year there. But to get to a certain level in life, you have to actually put on those years, right? And the fact is, in a career which, so I'm 30 years in and probably got another 6-7 years left, right? So in a career of 35 to 40 years, a couple of years here and there don't really make a difference, right? So when you look back at your career, you don't really remember those instances where you thought I should have been here and I wasn't, and somebody else got there. But the unfortunate thing is we are all human beings, of course, and therefore when a peer of yours managed to get ahead, right, and you don't, right, that sense of relativity plays very strongly on your mind, and you feel, oh gosh, why am I not moving ahead? But all I can tell you is be patient. Talent does not get, will always shine through. Talent will always come through, but you have to be patient, right? There are some things which can happen quickly. So if I like a book and I read a review, I can click on Amazon, the book will come in 24 to 48 hours. But a career needs time, right? Okay, we can move on. I think this is the other thing that, when we are selecting roles, right, and when we're selecting jobs, I've done, maybe this is my fifth or sixth job in my 3 decades of working, right? Money is very important. Money is absolutely important in life. It manages to make us fulfill our dreams, do what we need to do. But when you're looking at roles, right, money cannot be the only factor. And I can tell you this with experience that you need to look at the role, you need to look at the brand you're joining, you need to look at the culture of that organization, you need to look at the kind of people there, your team members, when you talk to people who are working there or have worked there, what do they say about that organization? Do they say it's got a people-centric culture, that they're invested in you, they have learning opportunities for you, you can create a career there, right? It's a whole package that needs to come through, right? Money is very important. I am not saying money is not important. All I'm saying is it needs to be a factor in all the factors that you actually use to determine whether to move in from one role to the other. Okay. Yeah. This is one thing I think, I heard this and it stayed with me. Like I said, I read a lot, and the other thing about me is I'm a voracious movie watcher. So I actually always think to myself every time that Netflix's share price is partly contributed by me, because I actually watch so much of Netflix and Amazon and Hotstar. I'm watching content all the time, right? And so the thing is, the point on this is that, so I read this. So whenever I hear something, read something, it sticks with me. This thing stuck with me. It says, don't be the caretaker of the status quo in life, right? Don't get into something saying, this is how I found it and this is how I'm going to leave it, right? You must strive to make a difference in whatever you're doing. If somebody asks me what is it that I seek to do in my role here now, in all the roles I've done, is that I want to make a difference, right? And to make a difference means I want to leave a legacy. I want to leave things better than how I found them. And therefore, I do not want to be the caretaker of the status quo. And I would just say, don't be the caretaker of the status quo. And this is true, I think, as much personally as it is professionally. Don't be content with how you are and who you are. Always seek to develop yourself and grow yourself from where you are. And this could be growth mentally, it could be growth spiritually, it could be growth physically by working out or doing all of those things. But don't be happy generally with the status quo of what is going on. Okay, we can move on. So the other thing in corporate life I've seen is that people are afraid of showing vulnerability, right? People are afraid of saying, I don't know. And I think the more senior they go, the more they hesitate to say, I don't know. Okay. I'd like to say that I have been a question asker from the time I was in school till today. Anybody who has ever worked with me knows that my appetite to ask questions is insatiable. My wife is super frustrated by it because I ask a lot of questions on a lot of things in personal life as well. But the point is that it is okay to be vulnerable. It is okay to say, I don't know, but I want to know and I'm willing to learn, right? And I think that is the approach that we should be comfortable with. There's no point hiding behind this facade of I'm on top of it and I know everything and I'm totally in control. Nobody can. I mean, fact of the matter is nobody can really know all of that, right? So you need to be okay with vulnerability. And this is something I think you have to role model, at the senior levels, because only when people see senior folks, saying, I don't know and asking questions, will they feel comfortable coming up and saying this as well. Okay. This thing, and I don't know how many ladies are on the call, and I think this is more geared for the ladies, and this is co-sponsored by Lean in India. It was the first book I read and put me on the journey of, I'm quite passionate about the cause of inclusion and diversity. And Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg was one of the first books I read on this, right? Is that don't hesitate to create visibility for your achievements, right? And I say this, that generally speaking, all the literature I read, all of the conversations I have with women is that women generally are less likely to create visibility for their achievements than men, right? Generally speaking. And I would say, don't hesitate to create visibility for what you're doing, okay? There is a difference between bragging. There is a difference between overplaying the role you played in the success of something, but equally, don't hesitate to create visibility. If you work for somebody, if you don't often say what it is that you have done or what you have contributed, sometimes people don't really register and it doesn't actually, stay in their mind. It's not that people want to ignore you or people want to actually make sure that they disregard what you've done, right? But just in the hubbub of the business, a person who's managing 15, 18, 20 people can sometimes forget that this individual actually did this role and that thing. So do not hesitate to create visibility for your achievements. If you think that you deserve that salary raise, if you think you deserve that promotion, talk about it, right? If you don't talk about it, like they say, the best way not to have something happen is not to ask for it, right? So if you ask for it, at least there is a possibility that something may happen. Okay, go on. This is a topic again close to my heart, right? This concept of a leadership shadow. So all of us are, cast. There is a set of behaviors that we all exhibit on a regular basis, right? So if somebody is to say, okay, tell us about Urvi or tell us about Sukirti, right? So people would turn around and say, I don't know both of them particularly well, but people who do may turn around and say, they're outgoing, they're warm, they're open, they believe in teamwork, they're friendly, they're always laughing, they always look at the bright side of things, or, they could be saying other things, right? The fact of the matter is, all of us, right, we cast a shadow based on the behaviors we have as leaders. And whether leaders know it as well, and this is not relevant for me running an organization, right, of 10 or 12,000 people, anybody who manages anybody, right, casts a leadership shadow, right? Which means people are always watching you. People are always seeing what is it that you do. People are most often than not less concerned about what you say than what you do, right? So you have to be sure to cast the right leadership shadow. In the personal space, they always say parents should do the right things in front of children because children are picking up what you're doing all the time, right? So I think in the corporate space, it's really important. In my career, I've learned a lot from a lot of people. Equally, there are people who have said, I don't want to be like this. This is behavior I don't want to do. Somebody is, ridiculing somebody in public. That is not what I actually want to do. So I think you have to be careful about the leadership shadow you're casting, and you should strive to cast a positive one and not a negative one. Okay, we can move on. Again, this is a very interesting thing. I was hearing a talk once, and this was one of the values of that organization, which is simply put and very deep, which says, do the hard right, don't do the easy wrong. Because very often in life, right, we'll end up doing the easy wrong because that's the path of least resistance. That's the path that is easier to do. And that's not the right thing to do, however. And as an example, if you're having a performance conversation with somebody, and that is a difficult performance conversation, don't talk around the point, but not talk to the point of what the person needs to do differently, right? The easy thing to do is, people generally speaking don't like confrontation, so they'll go easy, right? But the hard right is that you should give that message to that individual on where they need to improve. You need to do it respectfully. You need to do it so that the person doesn't feel, their shoulders shouldn't slump, their confidence shouldn't drop, their whole, feeling of, self-worth should not drop. But you need to do this, right? If, for example, somebody is a high performer, but is not following the values of your company, will you take the same decision with that individual that you would with somebody who's not a hard performer? Because you need to do the right thing across different kinds of things that happen in the organization. And I think this is a really, I always find that some of the simple things in life are explained, or some of the deeper things in life are explained in very simple words. And I just think that this is beautiful, that it says do the hard right and not the easy wrong. This is always what I think when you're leaders, at least you have to be always thinking about this. In your personal life as well, you have to be thinking about this. But sometimes in personal life, right, you can say, I don't want to take this confrontation. I'm not going to approach this issue with my friend. They said something which hurt me, but I'm not going to pick it up. I'm just going to let it go because it's not that important. But I guess when you're in a corporate environment, sometimes there are things which you cannot ignore. You have to take them head on. Yeah. Okay. Rohit, move the next one as well. There are two linked things, right? And this is, I'm going to illustrate this by a story as well. And this is that, first of all, it's important to remember that none of us are successful by ourselves. Nobody. Okay. Anybody, even an individual sports star like, let's say, Roger Federer, right? He has his family, he has his coach, he has his physios, he has his friends, he has his fans, he has so many people who make him who he is, right? Not one of us is successful by ourselves. And I think it's always important to keep reminding yourselves about that, of staying humble, right? You can reach wherever you have to in life, right? Always stay grounded, always stay humble, and always remember that your success is the sum total of the contribution of so many people. I'm going to take 2 minutes and I'm just going to narrate a story which is called Who Packed Your Parachute? And the story is about a US Navy pilot called Charles Plum. And in the Vietnam War, he was shot down and he became a prisoner of war and got released after 5 or 6 years, went back to the US, was sitting in a cafe having a coffee, and a person came up and said, are you Charles Plum? And he said, yes, I am. And he said, oh, okay, I thought so. And he said, but how do you know who I am? He said, because I'm the person who actually packed your parachute. And I'm glad that the parachute worked. And Charles Plum thought that I'm a fighter pilot. We are considered the cream of the cream. Here's this person sitting beneath the deck in that ship where I was a Navy pilot, right? Packing my parachute every single day on every single flight. I don't even recognize him. I don't know his name. Yet he's the reason that I'm still alive, and he's the reason that I'm here today having a cup of coffee. And that's the story that we have to ask ourselves all the time. Who has packed our parachute? Who are the people who contribute to our success, right? Our friends, our families, our mentors, our supervisors, people who we take advice from. There are so many people, right, who actually have a significant role to play in where you are in life. So I think it's important to remember that. It's always important to stay humble. I saw this movie, I don't know how many of you have seen it, called The Last Samurai with Tom Cruise. And in that, in the end, the Japanese emperor tells Tom Cruise, who's a warrior, he says it's important to know where you're going in life, but equally important not to forget where you're coming from. And I think that's actually really very true in life, right? Okay, we can move on. Again, this is something, and again, Rohit, if you can do the next click, right? It's got one of my favorite quotes from Maya Angelou, right? And the quote, of course, I'm sure many people have heard it, about how you'll forget what people said, you'll forget what they did, but you'll never forget how anybody made you feel, right? And I think this is important. Again, in corporate life, there is the feeling that the heart cannot be bought into the corporate life. Emotions can't be bought into the corporate life. It's only intellect which can be bought in, right? Fact of the matter is, of course, intellect is important. That's why, people get jobs and, do what they're doing in those jobs. But fundamentally, human beings react to emotion. People react as humans to emotion. When we see a movie, an ad, or anything which is touching, that is what actually stays with us, right? The best ads that you may have seen are the ads which actually strike a chord with you, not intellectually, but emotionally in your heart. And I therefore think it's important in corporate life to use your heart and your head equally. People should feel you're humane. People should feel you're approachable. People should feel that you'll hear their point of view, not just intellectually, but even from an emotional point of view. And I think, in corporate life, for right or for wrong, emotions are supposed to be kept out of the equation, and it's supposed to be only the intellect which is supposed to be in. Okay, can go on. Audience will be pleased to know that this is the last slide. And I think, so this is another thing. Again, I think the current environment of COVID, so much anxiety, all of us are, reading the press, all of us are on WhatsApp groups. All you're seeing is depressing news, frankly, right? And sometimes you feel like they're switching off TV because it's only, narrating, lifetime high here, lifetime high in this city, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I feel, one should focus on what one can control, right? In the corporate environment, the only thing you can control is your performance and your attitude. The rest, whether or not, for example, what will technology do to your job? What will automation do to your job? What is the meaning of President Biden coming in the US? What will that mean for Indian, offshoring industry? What will Brexit mean for India? All of these things, there's not much we can do about them, right? But they end up generating what is called free-floating anxiety, where you're just feeling anxious all the time. And the COVID example I gave, quite simply, while I can't do too much at a macro level, but I can be sure that I can do stuff at the micro level. Can you wear masks? Can you do social distancing? Can you make sure that you're actually doing appropriate behavior? And so on and so forth, right? Ultimately, the actions of individual people are what make the whole work, right? And therefore, I feel that in life, you need to focus on what you can control. I've written performance and attitude from a corporate point of view, and avoid free-floating anxiety. And again, a great cartoon where, Charlie Brown is being pessimistic and saying, someday we will all die. And, Snoopy is telling him, true, but on all the other days we will not, right? So the idea is that why don't you live, your life rather than worrying about what is going to happen on that one day. Yeah. Okay. This point is all about inclusion and our ability to actually open our minds to points of view which are not the same as ours. And nowadays, I notice even amongst close friends, right, that if you have a point of view and somebody has an alternate point of view, you're less interested in hearing what the other point of view is, as opposed to making them understand what your point of view is, right? And if somebody believes this is right or somebody believes that is right, You want them to believe what you think is right. I have seen on simple things like movies and conversations around movies, right? People will get into heated debates about what is right and what is wrong. I mean, you can leave aside the contentious things in life, right? They are bound to get polarized. But I just feel that somehow you need to be able to open your mind to being inclusive, right? I generally read on, Indian politics. I try to keep myself up to date on Indian politics, right? And I'll often try to read both sides of a issue just to try and get a view which is slightly fully formed rather than the view that you want to actually read, right? And the quote here is from this movie, right? It's again a lovely movie called Wonder with Julia Roberts, and the movie is about her son who's got a facial deformity, and he goes to school, and he's a young kid, and he gets bullied, okay, and he keeps getting bullied, and one day the principal calls the bully and this boy, Julia Roberts' son, into the room, and he tells the bully, he can't change the way he looks. Why don't you change the way you see, right? And I just thought, again, such a powerful thing, right? That is what inclusion and diversity is all about. Everybody, every progressive corporate is pushing this now, right? Diversity actually is easy to drive. So for me to say that I want to hire more women, more differently able people, different regional representation, etc., it's very simple. It's a question of hiring. The inclusiveness is a difficult thing. How does your mind actually think? How are you brought up? What do you believe in? What have you seen as you've been growing up? So therefore, in Kpmg, interestingly, we don't call it diversity and inclusion. We call it inclusion and diversity, because we find that the inclusion is a far difficult thing to drive, because that's about mindsets. So I think, there's this Hindi line which I read once which said, nazar mat badlo, apna nazariya badlo. And I think that's really nice, right? Because that's what it is. We have to change the way we see, and we have to open our mind up to hearing a point of view which is different. You may not agree with that point of view, but at least hear it and try and see, can you learn from it, right? Okay. This, I think, this is important again in both corporate and personal life. I'll take the corporate angle on it. That you have to create an environment of trust, transparency, and psychological safety in organizations. That's the only way people will talk up, speak up, and say what is on their mind. For a corporate to improve, for a corporate to do better than what it is, right? People have to trust leaders that they can say what is on their mind without fear of retribution. Even when you create a culture of trust and transparency, even then people will not come up and speak. But if you don't create this, there is no chance that they will speak. And how do you build trust? It's a simple thing. You have to say what you mean, and then you have to do what you say. It doesn't mean that when I get onto calls with people in KGS and we talk about the pandemic and what we are thinking of, it's not that we want to sugarcoat what is happening or what we are wanting to do, right? You have to be able to say what is on your mind, tell people this is what we're thinking, and then you have to do exactly what you say, right? Because saying, as I said, talking is cheap, right? The action is what is difficult. So I do think that you have to create a culture of trust and transparency, for any corporate to succeed and for any corporate to actually move ahead. Okay. And this is the last point. And the last point is that, this is a phrase which is, is very popular currently in corporates, which is that you have to have a growth mindset. And this means you have to believe that you are capable of learning and being much more than what you are today. You can't say that I have reached the limit of what I can know. I cannot change the way I am. I am the way I am. You have to say, no, I can learn. No, I can grow. No, I can become different, right? Honestly speaking, I'm not somebody who really likes exercise, but I love eating. And, so therefore, at some point, I'm now 54. At some point, you have to figure out the metabolism of your body versus, what you like doing. And at the end, there may be people on this call who resonate with what I'm saying. But the fact of the matter is, I get myself to walk 1 hour every day, right? That's my idea of investing in myself, at least from an exercise point of view, right? Because there is nothing else. I don't like going to gyms and so on and so forth. And I love eating. And all exercise and all weight control is a simple mathematical equation, right? It's calories in versus calories out, and that equation has to, be in balance. So I think that's on the personal front, but you have to keep investing in yourself and learning and learning and learning. For me, it comes from reading. It comes from sessions like this. I was on a panel discussion yesterday on the future of work. There were 4 panelists, such a fascinating, learning experience, hearing what all of them were talking about, right? And you have to keep thinking that there is no end to what you can learn. Okay. I don't understand technology very well. Okay, because as I said, I'm an accountant. So I don't understand technology that well, but there is somebody in our organization who is, I reverse mentor with. Every time I don't understand something, I call him up. I tell him, please explain this to me. He leave me a voice note explaining what it is. And that's how I try to keep myself abreast of technology. I can still only be 5 on 10 compared to people who are actually, technologists. But the limited point I'm making here is that for the current world that we are in, gone are the days where we could say that we're knowing one thing and that will get us through our careers. Absolutely not. Careers are changing almost overnight. Jobs are changing almost overnight. And you have to keep investing in yourself, have to have a growth mindset. So with that, I've come to the end of the 4 pages, and hopefully what I said resonated with you.
Wow, Samir, that was amazing. And you were to point, but now you leave me with a couple of questions, especially that has been raised through your presentation. So who were those people that you would like to say helped you be successful?
Yeah, so I see again, you always think, I have to say that one thing I always have felt, and all of us I'm sure feel, is that, my parents are no longer alive, but I always feel that I owe a lot to them because, I think my work ethic, they were both doctors. My work ethic I picked up from them. I think my very strong moral compass, I picked up from them. I think my sense of values and integrity I picked up from them. And I strongly believe that of all the relationships in the planet, the one truly selfless relationship is between a parent and a child, right? Every other relationship, there is a give and a take, right? And I think, now that I've got children, I fully understand what that means. I think parents normally don't want anything other than your love and emotion back, right? Otherwise, they just are willing to give without expecting anything back in return. So I think I'm motivated by my parents for sure. My wife allows me to, have a successful corporate career because, she chose to give up hers to look after her home. So I'm thankful to her. And I think on the corporate side, the 2 people who I kind of look up to, one is Indra Nui from PepsiCo and Jack Welch from GE. And I think because they had the gift of making the complex simple. And that is a true gift, to make complexity simple, because Google, Apple, these are simple devices with a lot of complexity behind them, right? But I think the art of making things simple is actually a true art. It's easy to make things sound complicated and full of jargon, etc. How do you explain things so that everybody understands them? So that's, at least both of them are people who I really look after.
No, but thank you. You actually made your thoughts in a very simple fashion. And I think a lot of people are actually saying that in the chat box. So thank you. I think you do live up to that. Over to you, Urvi.
Sure, Sukirti. So, very insightful journey, Samir, I must say, and our audience must have loved it too, So you have a very successful corporate career and you're leading one of the most sought after organizations. I want to understand, what is that CEO mindset? Is there one, is there a CEO mindset that really exists?
So I think, Urvi, the way I like to answer that question is, first of all, I always think to myself that CEO stands for actually Chief Everything Officer, and because you have to end up doing everything, right? But I think there are 2-3 elements, and again, hung up with my whole movie and my seeing movies all the time, right? A good quote from Spider-Man is that with great power comes great responsibility, and I believe that as the CEO of Kpmg, there is a huge sense of ownership I feel on the careers of all of the people who work here, and how to make sure that me and my leadership team are able to create a fulfilling environment, and an environment where people actually enjoy getting up to and coming every day, right? And it takes a lot of hard work to do that, right? So one is, I think you have to have ownership, you have to have accountability, you have to have the responsibility. I think a couple of the other things are that I view myself as the Chief Culture Officer of Kpmg, right? Because fact of the matter is, the culture of the organization is what I'm the one who's dictating it. I'm the one who's setting it. I'm the one who's role modeling it. I'm the one who's calling people to task if they don't behave how we expect them to behave, right? And then I guess, finally, casting the right leadership shadow. Hopefully, I find the pressure on myself the most to role model the kind of behaviors that at least me and my leadership team expect from the organization. So I guess that's the way I think about it.
Great. Chief Everything Officer has definitely struck the chord.
And actually, the other day, somebody had told me once that, the other thing is the Chief Energy Officer. And that's actually very true, because the ability to energize an organization and get them motivated behind, a vision or a strategy, that is definitely the job of the person at the top.
Sure. Fantastic. Over to you, Sukirti.
I know. I think a lot of women are definitely resonating with your term, Chief Everything Officer, because I think we feel that on a daily basis.
That is very true.
But Samir, sometimes we look at your career and it has been incredibly successful. And, we want to talk a little bit about failure because, a lot of people are also trying to understand, and you also spoke about this, that 1, 2 years doesn't matter, but the toll that it takes on us when we are not actually climbing, because we always want to see ourselves kind of moving to the next level.
And again, see, I think on failure, right? Failure, and so I'll talk about vulnerability as much as I talk about failure. So when I was in Barclays, and I often say this, right? I was the chief operating officer when I joined. And in 2 years, the person I used to report to moved on to another job, and I became the CEO of the organization called Barclays Shared Services, right? And I can tell you that it was a very, going from being the number 2 to the number 1 is a very butterfly in moments experience, right? You're supposed to be on top of everything. You're supposed to know everything, right? And there were many nights, the first 92 days to maybe, first 3 to 6 months, when I'd get up saying, oh my God, I don't know this in finance. I don't know this in IT. I hope I kind of, follow that up, and I must follow this up, et cetera, right? So I think you asked about failure. I'll come to that. But one is, again, I'm telling you that one can feel vulnerable at any level, right? Even when I joined Kpmg, right? I was the banker before that. I joined a Big Four, right? I didn't know anything about Big Fours, right? I'm a chartered accountant, but I didn't really understand too much about the intricacies of the business. You have to throw yourself into it. You have to learn it, and you have to reach a level where you finally feel comfortable saying, okay, now I know enough to do my job, right? And I guess on failures, to your specific question, the point I would like to think about is that it's also all about organizational culture. If somebody doesn't do something properly, and they don't do it because in spite of planning it right, in spite of doing everything properly, in spite of really thinking through whatever they could think through, and then it goes wrong, then the organization has to be able to be supportive of that individual rather than really pillaring them for it and saying, that is it, that is, a big blemish on your career, right? And I think, therefore, organization cultures have a lot to play in how failure is viewed and not. And now, of course, clearly, if you do something wrong once, if you keep doing it wrong again and again and again, then that's, anyways, that's not going to work. But, if somebody's trying to launch a product and they think through the market and they think through the technology and they think through the features and they do the focus groups, but for whatever reason, the product bombs, at least then you feel that the person did what that person had to do and then actually failed rather than they went into it in a half-baked way and actually it failed. So I think if you go in prepared and don't fail, an organization culture should be willing to accept that, in fact, encourage it and say, it's okay, right? And if, as I said, if you have an environment of trust and transparency, at least people will come up and tell you about things like this rather than you getting to know them when it's too late to actually do anything about it.
No, thank you for that, because I know some of people do struggle with this and people do feel it's hard to overcome that blemish. Over to you, Urvi.
Sure, Sakirti. So, we heard from you about inclusion and diversity and how that plays a very important role. And this is, from what I understand, this is very, very important for women, where we understand that women may have a lot of gaps in their career due to many challenges in their life, due to many bumps that they come across, maternity, ecosystem, whatever the reason may be. And of course, these unprecedented times don't help. And because women are, they're doing double shifts. They're pretty much, after their work, it's home and then kids and all of that. So it's a never-ending task. So what is your advice to these women? How can they continue to be successful even with these breaks and even in such challenging times?
So I think, one thing I must say, the last 12 months or 13 months have taught me is that just the sheer amount of incredible effort it takes to run a home. Just incredible, right? You don't often appreciate it, right? And I've often said in Kpmg that, I salute working mothers more than anybody else, right? Because the ability to balance so many different things is a tightrope, which is not easy to run, right? And all I would say is that, for the women on this talk, that seek out those progressive organizations, right? Seek out organizations which have frameworks, which have policies, which are truly supportive in inclusiveness, right? We have had, occasions, and I was delighted to read a couple of comments on LinkedIn, from colleagues in Kpmg, both Kpmg India and KGS, where women are getting promoted on maternity leave or as they're going on maternity, right? That is a sign of a progressive organization. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to talk up Kpmg, but I'm just saying there are many organizations who are progressive, right? And we learn from all of them. But I think we've had occasions where we've had a colleague, fairly senior colleague, wanted to tend to her child, wanted to take a 6-month sabbatical, right? We told her, we're going to hold on to your job for 6 months. We're not going to fill it up with somebody. We'll stretch somebody's existing job. Come back, don't worry about it, right? So I think find progressive organizations which have policies, which have frameworks. And I think for women to succeed, right? And I think they need a supportive environment at home, and they need a supportive environment in the organization, right? We can't do much about the home front. It's personal domain, but absolutely, I think that we can do about the organizational front, right? And I absolutely think that, as I said, this is a topic that is close to my heart, and, it needs to be driven from the top. These kind of things need to be role model. They need to be driven from the top, and people need to know they're actually non-negotiable, right? And then you need to have metrics. So we, for example, check ratings by male and females. We check compensation by male and female. We check for attrition levels by male and females. We see promotion levels by male and female. All of these just to make sure no unconscious or conscious bias is creeping into processes in the organization. So I think that's the way I would.
Fantastic. I think audience are loving it. I see respect for Sameer's point of view is amazing and refreshing points. So some of the thoughts that I'm just reading out as we're moving along.
And thank you. I know there's a bunch of comments coming through. I'm trying to speed read them, and but thank you.
I'm loving also Vishaka's comment. Now we need to seek out progressive husbands as well. Coming back.
There's a lady called Apurva Purohit who's the CEO of Jagran Prakashan, a very famous IND speaker. And she always says that the best career choice a woman can make is actually selecting the right husband.
You got it, Sameer. She, in fact, started our leadership series.
Okay.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Yeah.
But fantastic, Sameer. Now you've driven our curiosity because you just told us that you attended this web seminar yesterday on the future of work. So what is the future of work before we start taking our audience questions?
I think before I get there, I'm very intrigued by this book called Chup Chup or something behind you.
Yes,
right?
it is. It's a very good book. It's by Deepa Narayan. So, she is going to be a speaker for us. So she talks about why women stay silent.
Okay. Looks like the book I must add to my collection. Okay. So the future of work. So one is, and I think there was a very interesting way of depicting it, that the future of work, the workplace, and actually the workforce, right? And there are 3 elements of it. And I won't spend too much time talking about the future of work itself, because let's say automation, technology, a lot has been said about that. But I think as an organization, we are dealing with the fact of, can we get people to work from anywhere, for example? Can we actually say that we can think of not necessarily having people in the locations where we have offices, okay? Can we say that if there are good people who are leaving because they are having to relocate because of parental reasons, marriage reasons, into a city where we don't have an office, can we actually get them to continue working with us, from anywhere that they have to? So I think working from anywhere in some shape or form, we don't have enough time to really go into it. It's actually a complex subject to, really, if you go into the nuances of it. But absolutely, I think work from anywhere is something that is going to happen. I think hybrid working is for sure here to stay. And hybrid working could mean many things to many people. For us, it means you will work, let's say, 2 days out of home, 3 days out of office, as an example, right? We do not anticipate ever that our colleagues, unless we don't have client permissions to work from home, that's a separate thing. But if we do have client permissions, then we think that about 40% of the time you'll work from home and about the balance you'll be in office. So I think that then leads to a number of questions. Today, everybody is working from home. But when people get into office spaces, partly and partly in the home, how do you make sure that managers actually can performance manage this in an effective way? How can managers manage who are used to seeing people in front of them now start managing a workforce partly in office, partly at home? How do you make sure that you don't start subconsciously promoting or favoring people who are in office near you rather than people who are sitting at home, right? So how are those elements going to be thought through? So we are debating that quite a lot right now, right? And then, of course, what kind of technology, what kind of tools, how do we actually get people enabled to actually work from home effectively on a long-term basis? And one thing I will say here is that a thing that occupies a lot of my mind is, how do you get culture to continue to feel intact when you have people working from home, right, on an ongoing basis? Culture needs contact. Culture needs people to see, to hear, to see how people actually behave and in a live environment. So how do you ensure that the culture of an organization continues to remain strong and continues to be felt by people, even if they're, moving in and out of office? So I think it's a complicated thing. It's a bit like driving a car in a fog right now. You're trying to figure out, the road ahead and how do you go and going slowly. But, those are some of the thoughts, at least, that we are thinking.
Thank you. And that was very good because I think a lot of questions was coming about that. So I'm going to ask Mobin to unmute and we'll take our first question. Go ahead, Mobin.
Hey Samir, my name is Mubin. I'm based out of Glasgow. My question was, I wanted to know about the current corporate governance culture and where do you see the role of auditors? And do you think that auditors need to do little more, or do you think it has a regulator to work on it?
Mobin, thanks. I think this is a question which is getting mind share of many regulators and many audit companies across the world, including ours, right? That it's a complex topic which needs to think through what is the role of an auditor versus what people think is the role of an auditor. What is the role of the board? What is the role of the management of the company? And what is the role of the regulator in this whole thing, right? And you said you're based in Glasgow, the UK. At this point, there is a lot of active talk about, do you operationally separate the audit arm of a big four from the consulting and tax arm so that the conflicts of interest that are perceived to be there are actually managed? And there's a lot of work that is happening in the UK specifically around this. And, I'm sure once one regulator takes a point of view, the other regulators around the globe will also start doing it. But absolutely, I think the question is, there are some high profile, collapses that have happened, which, are making people question what is the role of an auditor, right? What is the role of an auditor, for example, to detect fraud? Is it the role of an auditor to detect fraud? Or if a fraud is covered in a manner that you can't detect it, is the management responsible? Is the board responsible? What role do regulators have to play? So it's, again, this probably requires a session by itself to answer it. But, if you're based out of the UK, then at least you'll be much closer than others to how much attention this is getting in the UK in terms of the future of the audit practice and the role of auditors in that.
We'll take the next question from Shelly. Shelly, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Thank you, Sukirti. Yes, Ami, my next question to you is, first of all, I should compliment you. By looking at your presentation, it felt like as if a movie was going on, and I felt myself in that movie as an actress because I got connected. I got so much connected with your presentation. And I really caught one sentence from you, since, we all are work from home since March 2020. But the question which comes to my mind is, don't you think so that it fuels isolation, loneliness, anxiety, and too much of screen time? Because see, if I talk about myself, I was such a social person going out. I have, first half it was a job, and weekend we used to socialize and move out. But now I have made digital friends. My laptop, my mobile, my Netflix, 24/7, we are glued to this. So we somehow have cut off from the nature and everything. And, this has become our life. So my question to you is, how to bring positivity and how to get rid of all this, negativity, and how to beat the second wave of pandemic also. So any positive solutions to come out of it?
Yeah, and Shelly, thanks. And again, my own personal leadership style is very high touch. So I like walking around the office, meeting people, talking to them, and that's how I kind of also get my own energy, right? And I find it as frustrating at times of a start time on a Zoom call and an end time on a Zoom call, and then that's it, right? Offices are about you walk into somebody's workspace, chat with them, go down for a meal sometimes. There is so much that happens in an organization which cannot be replicated, unfortunately, in what we're currently doing, even though we are trying our best. But again, I would just say out here that to each their own in terms of how they need to deal with the stress and the elements they're feeling. I talked in the beginning about some of the things as corporates we are trying to do to respect that work and life and not say that just because you're at home, we'll call you whenever we feel like. But again, I'm going to say this at the risk of extreme repetition. At some point, one has to look at things relatively and say that, like I said, that, we, at least in Kpmg, I say this for us, that we're fortunate that we can be at home, for 1 year and we don't have to go out. There are hundreds of thousands of people who necessarily need to go out and for their jobs. And somebody sent me a beautiful WhatsApp forward today, which long forward, but the crux of it is, it says, and many of you may be already aware of this, that it says, we can keep saying we are actually in the same boat in the COVID scenario, but we are not actually in the same boat, right? We are in the same storm, but we are in different boats. And each one of our boats is going in a certain way. Some boats are, bearing this much better than some boats are not, right? And I was reading articles about, how so many people have got pushed from, a middle class background into a, lower set of background just because their savings have not been enough to, kind of to last of this. And like I said, I'm not aware of personal circumstances of people beyond a point. But for me, Shelly, honestly, I do this active thinking about, being grateful. I told you I like walking. The moment it becomes summer, the first thing when you step out, you say, oh my God, it's so hot, right? And then I always look at that security guard outside our office, our complex at home, right? He's standing wearing a full sleeve uniform in 36 degrees to 42 degrees temperature in Gurgaon where I am, and still manages to smile at me and wish me when I walk out, right? So I just think, there is that, don't want to be filmy about it, right? But they say, aur bhi gum hai zamane mein. So I just think the point is, there's a lot to be grateful for in life. We often get caught up in our own stuff, including me. Everything for me, my son not doing well in a subject becomes the biggest thing for me in life, right? And not thinking that, why don't I focus on the subjects he's doing well in, rather than always talking to him about that one subject he doesn't do well, right? So that's my take, that I try to just be thankful for that, everything that we have.
So the last question will take us from Dev Jyoti. She's having some problems, so I'll read it for you. What is the best way to handle scenarios when things don't go your way, especially during performance reviews? In spite of meeting all the defined goals, what do you do if you don't feel appreciated for your work?
Again, bit of a complicated subject, question, this complicated issue, because there are two things. If it's because of your supervisor, just being the kind who's not too much into appreciating, etc., then you just have to live with it, absorb it, right? There are some people who are very effusive in their praise, some people who are a little more guarded in their praise, each different personality. So that's, you have to see how that works for your particular situation. The other is, if you feel, which is a more tricky situation, if you feel that you're actually being you're being discriminated against at the at the pretext of somebody else. You're doing better than somebody else, but that other person is always getting the nod. They're getting the promotions. They're getting the better salary increments. There, frankly speaking, at some point you have to figure out that psychological safe space of, who do you go and talk to about that? Do you go and talk to the HR team about it? Do you go and talk to your manager's manager about it? And that's where I said that trust and transparency are very important in corporate life. You have to be able to feel trustworthy enough or trusting enough to go and talk to somebody else without thinking it's going to boomerang and come back on you, right? I can tell you that if we get an escalation of something, which is of inappropriate behavior, I like to believe that, we treat it with the seriousness it deserves and take it through. So I think this is a bit of a tricky situation, which there's a certain nuance to how you actually deal with it on the ground, depending on the kind of manager you are.
Well, thank you very much. That was really, really insightful. Everybody is saying absolutely. I mean, lots of amazing comments, wonderful session. Any last thoughts you'd like to leave us with?
I before the last thought, I will say this, Rakesh Glerias from KGS has got his hand up. So I'm going to use my privilege and say, can he be asked?
Yes, please. Do you mind if we go over a little bit then?
I'm totally cool.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Samir. Really appreciated getting to know, from KPMG and Privilege, you taking the last question from me. So one of the point you mentioned, right? Don't hesitate to showcase your achievements. But my point is, how do I differentiate when someone is going overboard and all the time giving self-appraisal and I'm the king, right? So how do we differentiate those kind of achievements?
So I think on this, Rakesh, the line between bragging and line between overselling yourself, etc. At some point, you have to have confidence in the organization and the supervisor's ability to be able to distinguish over talking and over engineering your achievements versus the truth of the matter, right? If you actually get the right supervisor, then honestly, sometimes you don't even have to showcase your achievements because they know what you're doing, right? So your work talks for itself and they'll do what is the right thing by you. But on this particular thing, like I said, in a team environment, you have to have the faith that, that your supervisor and that whole process of how ratings are done, people can have the smartness and the intelligence to figure out somebody is saying I did 10 things when in reality they did 2 things in a project. And in fact, from my own point of view, I negatively think about people who oversell themselves all the time, right? So that line between bragging, overselling versus just doing the right thing, that fine line has to be determined actually by each individual. And we all know, I'm sure of it, when we are over talking what we've done versus, what we haven't done.
So Samir, I'll come back to any last closing thoughts you would like to
No,
leave.
I would just say thank you to you and to Urvi for inviting me in this. Thank you for everybody who's taken out an hour on a weekend. I appreciate that. And again, I would just close by saying what I started with, that it's a difficult time right now for the country. But the Helen Keller's quote is what I'll end with, that the world is full of suffering, but it's also full of the overcoming of it. So we have to have faith in the fact that we will overcome what is currently happening.
Well, I'm going to quote now from Mobin, because he's given me a very good ending. He says, "We look forward to more leadership sessions from you. Your views are simple yet effective and come naturally." I think my 5 takeaways, the first one, of course, just reiterating what you've said, it's not all about money. Seeing things from a relative perspective, I think sometimes we forget that. I love the Chief Everything Officer, because I think that covers so much of what we do. I think the seeking out the progressive organizations, I think we don't think so much about that. And I think that goes with your last point, that how important culture is and finding that culture fit. So on behalf of Lean in India and Sipping Thoughts, we thank you today. It was an amazing, amazing session. You can see from the chat that people have really taken a lot away from this. So with that, I wish everyone a good night.
Thank you, and a happy weekend to everybody. All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you.